Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Four Guys Roundtable Show. This is Joe, aka Theo. We got Jeremy, Darth Pat, and AJ Nitro here with us tonight as well. We're going to be talking some NBA stuff. Just hits me right here in the good old heart because I just want to talk about this so bad.
Me too.
Once in a while, every other day, depends, all that good stuff. But we'll be talking about some NBA, some GOAT talk, some other jazzy NBA stuff as well. But I just want to, just a little side note here, just tell you what happened the other day to me. So, Jeremy, one of our other just normal chats that we have with the four of us, I was drinking iced tea out of one of these mason jars, right? So the other weekend, I was cleaning the kitchen, and I found some accessories for the mason jar. So I was like, where did these come from? I have no idea where it came from, who bought it. Fuck it, who cares? So cleaned it up, put it on there, and then my wife looks at me, and she's kind of like, that looks like a sippy cup for adults. And I was like, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, fuck yeah, it is. And then my son comes around the corner, and, she says it to my son, and my son just looks at me. He's like, Daddy's just weird. She's like, yeah, I know. That's your father. And I'm like, yeah, fuck it. Who cares? So here's my little sippy cup. Mason jar. Got the little plastic thing. Has the hole to put the thing, or you can just drink it. And got my, sweet tea / mixed lemonade, homemade. And look at this.
Pat's worried.
It's straw. It's fucking beautiful, guys. I recommend it. Get this stuff. I mean, there's iced tea in it now, but I mean, another night I might have something else that has a little stronger, but it is what it is.
So you moved down to North Carolina and turned into a hillbilly redneck with your mason jars, and then now you've turned into a baby redneck with a sippy cup.
Here's the thing. These mason jars just came out of nowhere because I think my wife needed them for work for some weird shit. And then we had extras, so I started drinking out of them. I was like, all right.
I thought maybe you were going to say she started canning.
No, it's for something else, and they were extras. I mean, if you want to talk about the redneck part, I said to my son the other day, we were driving home from Target, and I go to him. I said, Nico, I said to him, I was like, listen, if you ever see Daddy come home with a big red truck with big tires, you better run. Because I've gone full-fledged redneck, and you're in trouble then. And he just kind of looks at me. He's like, Mommy, what's a redneck? She's like, you don't want to know. Just keep it to yourself.
Just show him a picture of Stone Cold Steve Austin. That'll sum it up.
Probably, yes.
No. See, no. I'm going to disagree with you there. Somebody who spends a decent amount of time in, what you would call like the Deep South. I will say two things about Joe's story that he just, and also your comment, Matt. One, I'm not at all surprised that he's already gone this route. And two, Austin is not a redneck. Austin is a Texan. That's a completely different subculture and a completely different subset of human being. That's all I'm going to
He brought the redneck population to wrestling, so I'll put him in that group for that sole reason.
Oh, come on. We know the redneck population was already there in wrestling.
He doubled it.
That's hey, the territories that everybody always loves to talk about as having been it had the most vibrant crowds and the ones who seem to take them most seriously, whether it was Florida or Mid-Atlantic or Mid-South or World Class. What do they all have in common? They're all either in the South or Texas. Okay. I rest my fucking case.
He brought the rednecks. He brought the redneck NASCAR people to the WWE. That's what he did. Yes,
he maybe brought some people to WWF after years of not watching WWF because it was them from the Northeast. But yeah.
So I got to tell you guys, speaking of the whole redneck thing, redneck is definitely not just the South, because when I was taking my oldest daughter back to college so we could pick up her stuff and bring it home, these two big ass jacked up trucks fly by us. One has the stack coming out of the back of it. One has the big tailpipe. They're both big diesel trucks, and what do? They dump, and just big clouds of black smoke everywhere all over the road. I was like, it was so thick from these two knuckleheads that you couldn't even see. I was like, and then of course that shit just stinks on top of it. It does. It smells terrible. I'm like, what the? God damn it! Like, what the hell? Like, could you just drive normal? I guess I'm old.
My favorite like story to like tell my friends in Ohio about PA is that when I worked at Champs, I could always tell the Eagles fans from the Squealers fans, because if they came in
watch what you're gonna say.
If they came in with no teeth, they were Squealers fans. Wearing their Zubaz pants and all that crap. I knew it was a Steelers fan, so never failed me either.
Good old Zubaz pants.
Pennsylvania is definitely, you look at it state to state, side, so side to side, top to bottom, is quite eclectic. I mean, like, central Pennsylvania, like northwestern Pennsylvania, even like the northeast part of Pennsylvania, you get like above, the Lehigh Valley area where Jeremy and I are, definitely, redneck, north basically. Pittsburgh's kind of its own entity. Philly's kind of its own entity. And then, again, where we live in the Lehigh Valley, I've always felt like has a weird cross-section of, like, just about everything. I mean, it's still predominantly white, but there's a lot of minorities, and there's a lot of multiple types of minorities. There's African Americans, there's Hispanic Americans, Indian Americans, Asian Americans. So we just have a real interesting kind of subsection of, like, everything here, while still being predominantly white and, just a little hickish. But it seems like, again, over the last, I don't know, say maybe 10, 15 years or so, it's like they've been trying to turn us into, an extension of New York and New Jersey in a lot of ways. We're becoming quickly like the warehouse capital of the world. And you see all these, nice little, housing developments that spring up and everything. So it just makes you go, well, somebody who's somewhat affluent is moving in, but it ain't me.
Well, you can tell how different just the area in which we live in, Pat, is compared to other areas. We have such a wide variety of people who like different teams, and I think that's why Matt felt so at home, because when he lived here is because we had so many people that liked the Giants, so many people that like Dallas Cowboys. You had Packers, you had Steelers. Like, you could find a fan for almost any team in this damn area, and we live an hour north of Philadelphia, which was crazy.
Well,
not that I think everybody that should be an Eagles fan or a Sixers fan or anything like that, but it's like, why the hell are there Dallas fans around here? Like, that was the only fan that ever drove me nuts in this area. Is like, why are there Dallas fans here? You're in Pennsylvania. You don't live anywhere close to Dallas, and Dallas is not America's team. Stop that shit.
When I was there, all of you guys who I'm friends with, like all of my friends in PA, not one of us, there's like 8 or 9 of us, and the only people that like the same team are Joe and the other Pat. They both like the Bears. Everybody else likes a different team. It's really strange that 8 or 9 people, 2 people, and only one person likes the Eagles, you. So it was really strange when I thought about that like everybody likes a different team.
It's weird in a lot of ways because, again, you talk about people liking all different teams. I used to work with a guy at T-Mobile whose favorite teams for baseball and football were the Phillies and the Cowboys. And I told him repeatedly that he was violating like the fundamental laws of sports fandom. I said, there is no way you can be a Cowboys fan and then also root for any team that calls Philadelphia, New York, or Washington its home. It's just a friggin' impossibility. Or San Francisco, for that matter, because the Cowboys and the 49ers had a long rivalry and everything. But it's like, I just said, I don't understand this. And he gave me his reasoning once, but unfortunately I forgot what it was. I think he was just one of those guys who, again, bought into the Cowboys America's team bullshit, which, again, when I was coming of fandom, the Cowboys were in a down spot, in the late 80s, really. So I wasn't old enough to know their 70s glory days with Landry, but I was definitely there, of course, for the rise of the Jimmy Johnson, Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith teams. And I know plenty of people who jumped on their goddamn bandwagon. There's a guy there's a guy who used to live right down the road from me, huge Eagles fan. All of a sudden, in 1991, when the Cowboys go 11-5, make the playoffs but lose, all of a sudden he's rooting for the Cowboys.
From the Eagles to the Cowboys, that is horrible.
That deserves a swift kick in the nuts.
I don't have. I wish I would have taken a picture and had physical evidence so we could put it up right now to show that one night where Jeremy had an Eagles jersey and a Cowboys jersey and an Eagles hat on because of a bet he lost with me. I wish we still had the physical evidence of that.
There is no physical evidence. That has been erased. Never happened.
Those people that night were looking at Jeremy like, what in the hell is going on with this guy? They were playing each other that night in a Monday night game, too. So he's wearing a Cowboys jersey and an Eagles hat, and people are like looking at him and just shaking their head.
If I saw him walking, I'd be like, that motherfucker lost
the bet to me.
Only way he'd be walking in like that.
It was still fun for me to watch Jeremy squirm a little bit that night.
Well, the other thing too, again, Jeremy mentioned about people in this area liking all sorts of different teams and everything. I've said I'm a Giants fan. I'm originally from northern, what I guess you could call northern Jersey. It's like, okay, where I live, the New Jersey border is only like 6-7 miles to the east here, if it's even that, And I don't know if it's still this way, but back in the day, and I'm talking, this is 30 years ago now, where you lived, obviously determines which local broadcast you get and everything. So where I live here, my local stations are the Philly stations, so I'm going to see the Eagles on Sunday on Fox and everything. But if I go 6 miles to the east and just cross over the Delaware River into Jersey, it's going to be the Giants and the Jazz, So it's weird just how the borders get drawn and everything too. And it's kind of funny because since we don't have the Sunday ticket right now, since we don't have DirecTV anymore, and that's the whole story for one day, probably a discussion. But if the Giants are going to be on the CBS affiliate, with our cable, we somehow get the New York Fox in addition to getting the Philadelphia Fox, but we don't get the New York CBS. So if the Giants are going to be on the New York CBS station, and if they're going to play at the same time that the Eagles are going to play, or the Eagles are going to be at home, they're going to get blacked out on that CBS channel, so we won't see it. So we literally have to go to my aunt's house over in Jersey if we want to see the Giants game, just because we don't have the friggin' Sunday ticket anymore.
So we should probably
it's just weird. It's just
jump
weird.
To the topic. Maybe we're boring everybody now.
Well, I hope not.
I would hope it's not boring. I think
just drinking alcohol if it was boring people. I'll make it more fun.
You said something about wanting to do an intro. Well, hey, I think we had an intro. Yeah, we're just kind of bullshitting with each other because if there's one thing one of us can sling, it's some bullshit.
That's right.
On that
goddamn.
What we want to talk about today, as Theo said, is the NBA and the GOAT, if you will. And if you don't know what GOAT means when we're talking about sports, I don't think this is the show for you. You should probably already know what that term means. Anyway.
And the 4 fans that we have just dropped off. Thanks, Pat.
I told you I was going to, hey, they don't call me Darth Pat for nothing,
That's right.
You can't handle the dark side. You're not in the right spot. But anyway, there are a couple facets to this discussion we would like to do. So I think what we want to start off with doing, now there's one component of this argument we're going to talk about, I think, a little bit more extensively. But I think what we want to do first is just kind of throw out the names of the guys who we think reasonably can be considered as the greatest of all time. Now, I will freely admit, I'm not as big of an NBA fan as I was 15, 20 years ago. As
What happens when you're a Knicks fan. But anyway,
exactly. As I mentioned last time, when you're a New York Knicks fan and the franchise has been as pathetic as any in sports, and that includes the Cleveland Browns or, the Tampa Bay Rays for most of their existence, or, just like insert the name of any bottom feeding team here, basically.
I knew the Knicks were in trouble when they hired Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, it's a little hard to really care about the NBA, despite the fact there's been so many great players in the NBA over this period of time,
For sure.
So what I would say is, because I can tell he wants to say something, let's throw it over to and AJ. when you think of the NBA greatest of all time, what names are the first ones that come to your
mind? Probably Bird and Magic. Jordan, Bird, Magic. Like all three of them. So those three guys like changed the game on like levels. Like nobody watched the NBA before Bird and Magic. I've read so many books and done so much like research and all this kind of stuff. Nobody watched the NBA before Bird. Everything was taped. Like even when Bird and Magic first got into the league, like I was watching the Celtics when I was like 5 or 6. To watch Celtics like Lakers playoff games, they tape delayed everything by hours. So you weren't even seeing it live. We're so spoiled now. Like you can go on your phone and find highlights of the game 5 minutes after it happens. In the 80s, you had to wait 4 hours to watch the game sometime, and you didn't have the internet, so you didn't know what the score was or anything. Like you had to wait. That to me, those are the kind of things that's like changing a game when these two guys come along and they put the NBA on the map essentially. That they changed the game just from that standpoint. There's other ways. Like I think that Bird, for me, he was my favorite player as a kid, and I think still to this day, the one thing I can say about him that supersedes everybody else is that I think he was the most intelligent player I've ever seen. I think he had the highest basketball IQ of anybody I've ever seen it play in the NBA. And I think Jordan and Magic, and there are other guys who are up there, but I think Bird had the highest basketball IQ of anybody. That's why he was successful as a GM and a head coach. The only other person who's really had any success at those two things is Steve Kerr. And he was a role player. He wasn't like the kind of player that Larry Bird was. So I think that helped him be a really good coach and stuff. Just because you're a good player doesn't always mean you're going to be good at the other two facets of it. He's the one guy that's been really good at all three, and it's because his basketball IQ was so high. So I think those three guys. I think Duncan, maybe Tim Duncan's name you could make a case for him. Maybe he's probably the greatest power forward of all time. And then in like 10 or 15 years, Steph Curry is going to be coming out of my mouth in this discussion. I'm sure of it, just because he's the best shooter I've ever seen. So those are kind of the guys for me. But Bird, Magic, and Jordan to me are probably the three guys who definitely would be in my like top 5 for sure.
Right. And you mentioned Steve Kerr, AJ, when you're talking about like how he had that success. Steve Kerr was another guy, even though he was only a role player for the Bulls, he had a very high basketball IQ. Like he understood the game and how it played, and being with Jordan and that and having that kind of play allows you to see the game a little bit differently because you have that super athletic superstar player. And I think that's what has made him successful in being able to help put together teams through drafts and stuff like that.
Well, something that you mentioned, AJ, too, I think is also very telling. You mentioned this about Bird and his basketball IQ. And, this kind of also ties into what you said about Steve Kerr. You see this in pretty much all the major sports. The guys who are the best players don't necessarily make the best coaches or managers. Ted Williams was one of the greatest players of all time in baseball. He had a very uneven, to put it nicely, managerial record when he managed the Senators and then the Rangers in the late 60s and the early 70s. And he apparently didn't like click with a lot of the guys that he managed, that a bunch of the guys on the team formed what they called the Underminers Club, which was strictly the purpose of which was to get Ted Williams fired. So again, Bird is like the rare guy who I think is, like you said, was a superstar player and then became a pretty good coach. I mean, again, some of the greatest managers in baseball from recent times. Joe Torre was a pretty good player. He won an MVP, but he wasn't an all-time great. Bobby Cox and Tony La Russa. I don't think Tony La Russa ever made the majors. If he did, it was very briefly. And Bobby Cox was very much a role player for baseball as well. So just an interesting thing that I've always thought of. Now, something else. Okay. I've seen professional documentaries, like I think on HBO and stuff, where they talk about like who saved basketball. And the discussion, I guess, always kind of comes between, well, was it the Bird Magic combo? or was it Jordan? Who do you really think deserves more credit for that?
You can go either way. Like you can go either way. Like I said, because nobody watched basketball before Bird and Magic. It's hard to not. I think Jordan got the casual fan. I think Jordan probably brought people who had no intention. You also, like, Bird and Magic also came in when everybody was doing drugs, like, regularly. I mean, even Jordan talked about on The Last Dance about how his rookie year, they were like, are you in or out? And he's like, I'm out. So he didn't want nothing to do with that. So it's hard. It's hard because it was two players to one, because I think Jordan's the greatest personally. It's tough. That's why I always group the three of them together. Even though Bird and Magic were 5 years before Jordan, I kind of grouped the three of them together because I don't think there was another time period where anybody came along. You can go back and find times in wrestling when something similar to that happened, like in the Attitude Era. You can find guys who came along all of a sudden and changed everything. Those three guys came along in a 5-year period and changed the NBA forever. And I don't know if we're ever going to see guys like that, like those three ever again. I think those guys are hard to duplicate. So Theo,
true.
Tell us about Jordan, Theo.
Well, you gotta add Jerry Sloan to that mix of player and coach.
True. Yeah.
He had a good, he didn't play on very good Bulls teams, but he was one of the best players on that team, and he had a good NBA career. I mean, his jersey's hanging in the rafters. And a long NBA coaching career. So he was a very smart man in regards to that.
For me, I said that he was but Bird was a GM and so was Kerr. They weren't just a coach and a player. They were also GMs too. So that was more of it for me.
I got you. But, you still don't want to forget, you don't want to forget about the aspect too, because he's kind of that next person right there.
No, he is.
Kind of the same concept in regards to that. So I would say, going back to what Pat said, I think Bird and Magic started it, because if you go back and you look at it, coming out of college, they had, two good teams. They faced off, the rivalry started in college and then kind of transpired to them ending up going to the Lakers and the Celtics, two teams who had already won a crap load of NBA titles, and they take their teams and they face off 5 times in the NBA Finals in the early 80s, late 70s, whatever it was.
I think 4.
So
I think it was 4.
So I mean, you gotta look at it, I think that they started it, and then as they started getting some more people kind of involved in it, with those two being a rival in the Eastern and Western Conference, and then Jordan just kind of came along, and he's just a flashy, phenomenal rookie and whatnot, and I think he just kind of started to take over for them as they were kind of getting things back together. Like AJ said, Michael brought the casual fan to the game and kind of elevated that. But then, in the early 90s, that's when, the Jordan brand just took off, the Olympics. Jordan really made it a global market for the NBA with the Nike deal, with the Jordans, just a clothing line, then just everything, the commercials. What other NBA player was making commercials before Jordan? I mean, maybe some Converse commercials and some other local commercials.
Those were terrible commercials, those Converse commercials.
There was one good Converse commercial with Bird and Magic, where Magic drove up in a limo to the old court in the country with Bird. That was the only good commercial for shoes or for anything before we got to be like Mike and all the Mars Blackman and all the Jordan. That was the only commercial I really remember standing out before Jordan started doing all that stuff, was that one. And everybody went out and bought those Converse loaded weapons too. My dad had the Larry Bird ones, there were Magic ones, Bird ones, Isaiah Thomas ones. Everybody bought shoes.
Because all they did was change the colors on them to make them for the damn team. Yeah, Converse was so generic in their shoemaking. Oh, let's take the same exact shoe, just change the colors from Detroit to the LA Lakers to the Celtics to this team, that team. They had 10 to 15, I think, NBA players that they had signed, and they just changed the colorway for them. I was this is ridiculous. That's the dumbest thing ever.
Everybody bought those shoes, though, so that's another aspect where I think somewhere somebody probably noticed that. Somebody said, okay, we came out with shoes for these players. Maybe this is somewhere we can make money. And Jordan's agent probably was licking his chops. And,
why Nike did what they did.
Jordan signed the greatest shoe contract ever. Like Nike made so much money off of him off that contract. Like it's ridiculous how much they paid nothing for that contract when you look at it now. And he made that company so much money. Like his first shoe contract, they said that they would have been happy if they sold like 30,000 pairs of the ones. They sold like almost 1.5 million pairs of the ones. So like that's 5 times more than what they were expecting. So at that point, they gambled, and Jordan wanted to go with Adidas. So like that's the crazy thing. What if Jordan had went with the company he wanted to go with?
So, I mean, you never know. I mean, just not just Jordan though. I mean, look at all the other. I mean, he signed a huge contract with McDonald's and a huge contract with Gatorade. Besides the local contracts, you have big market nationwide contracts he signed for a shitload of money and still has contracts with.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, he kind of put it on the map to expand your brand per se as a NBA player.
He did different things than Bird and Magic did too. Like Bird and Magic brought certain things, and then Jordan dunked, and he did stuff that those two didn't do. So that's why it's like the three of them. You got the dunker, the shooter, and the passer. You kind of got 3 facets of the game with all 3 of those guys that they changed the game dramatically just in those 3 areas. There's plenty of other areas too, but you could, if you delineated one category to each of them, that they changed the game just in that category alone. They made it way better. So that's why I still like to lump the 3 of them together, because I was 5 or 6 when Bird and Magic came into the league, and I was 10 when Jordan came into the league. And the Indiana State, Michigan State is still like the most watched college basketball game in history based on the time period. Like obviously more people watch games now, but if you base it on the time period and how many televisions, that's still the most watched like college basketball national championship game ever. So
yeah. So just to kind of feed off what you were saying, Theo, Jordan, I can't think of an NBA player before Jordan that was more recognizable in person wherever they went than Jordan. Now everybody that plays in the NBA that's kind of a superstar is recognizable due to social media and stuff like that, and they have a different level of stardom. But Jordan was like the first international basketball representative that, when they went to play, I think what was it, in Italy, they had those tournaments, tournaments in Italy that they went to, I think it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't even get off the bus without being mobbed by the Italian fans. Like, it was crazy to see that on The Last Dance, to see how big he had become internationally. And that was before the Olympics.
Well, another thing too was he just wanted to play basketball. I mean, his earlier contracts with the Bulls, he had to get stuff in there to play exhibition games. I mean, I was watching an exhibition game where he was over in Europe, and probably like the mid 80, I would probably make 87, 88 maybe around there, 86. But he's playing, and they just wanted, it was just a big hype of just Jordan being there. So in the first half, he played for the blue team and scored like 20 some points. And then the second half, he switched and played for the orange team and scored like 18 points or some jazz like that. And they were just like, they just wanted to see this man play. And he wanted to play basketball. He wanted to, be an exhibition showcase, and there was like a whole bunch of exhibition games he played in that there's no way in hell that they would let NBA players play in now, to be honest with you. Besides, NBA players playing in pickup games with each other, on the side. But that really wasn't something they really let players do really back then. But he just wanted to play, and there was just in his early career, people from overseas like recognizing this and be like, hey, can you come over and showcase what you can do in front of the French people and stuff. So that's that was kind of the beginning of him becoming so global too.
He was also never dumb enough to make a statement like a certain other person. I want to be the most famous basketball player ever. You don't come out and say stuff like that. It just happens. Like, you don't label yourself the king. It just happens.
Yeah, you don't give
I'm
yourself
sorry.
titles,
Who
people.
could you possibly be talking about,
you don't
AJ?
call yourself the GOAT. Other people call you that. This is, me and Joe's favorite subject.
Well, I mean, I think it's fine to say that you aspire to be that,
Right.
but to declare yourself that, yeah, I mean, you're not doing yourself any favors there, because you're just leaving yourself open for all kinds of stuff. So that's why it's like, what the hell was the guy's name? Harold Miner. When he gets
Jesus.
Baby Jordan.
when he gets hit with the Baby Jordan moniker, as far as I know, he did not give that to himself. The media kind of foisted that upon him for whatever reason, and that's not fair to him.
That wasn't his.
If he had gone around him, and called himself Baby Jordan, and then had the career that he had, then you got every right to rag on him and basically just say So,
you're right.
I actually felt bad. I felt bad for Harold Miner because of that. When the media labels you, anything related to Jordan because of the status that he had, the kind of player that he was, to put any kind of moniker or any label on you, they put you as Jordan, because it wasn't just Harold Miner. There was another player that I can't think of also that got that.
They do it with everybody now. If this person's the next Kevin Durant, this person's the next LeBron. They do it with everybody now. So the media has taken that to the extreme, and they label everybody something now.
I think that hurt Harold Miner, though.
It did. It killed his career.
Mentally.
That mentally destroyed his career, because he's like, oh, now I got to do this and I got to do that, and he's like, this guy really can't do all that.
But
stuff.
It's not a new thing either, because I mean, this is back before any of our time. But this is a story my dad always told me, because my dad's favorite player of all time was Mickey Mantle. Now, as Mantle's getting towards the end of his career, as the 60s are going on, the injuries and everything are catching up with him. The Yankees bring up Bobby Mercer. Bobby Mercer went on to have a really good career, but he wasn't Mickey Mantle. And the problem was that he was a center fielder for the Yankees who came from Oklahoma, just like Mickey Mantle. So the fact that he wasn't Mickey Mantle, and as if he could have been, for the fact that he wasn't Mickey Mantle, everybody kind of always looked at him as if he was like a disappointment. And when the Yankees traded him to the Giants for Bobby Bonds in the mid-'70s, the Yankees soured on Bobby Bonds after one season and then traded him away. And I think Billy Martin was still the manager then. He said something like, well, we found out that Bobby Mercer was actually a better player than Bobby Bonds was. So it was kind of like you didn't actually really know what you had until it was gone kind of thing. It's just kind of a funny story. But it's like, yeah, you can't ever saddle anybody with you're the next insert whatever name you want. Doesn't matter what sport we're talking about here.
The media.
Well, I got to interject for just a moment here. We got a public service announcement. If I could talk, we have a public service announcement because we're a half hour into our show here, and I still haven't mentioned anything. Just like always, at the end of our show, we have the Mount Rushmore. We don't know what it's going to be yet, fans, but you got to listen to the very end of the show to find out what the Mount Rushmore is going to be. 4 new heads for Mount Rushmore.
Sippy cups, that's what it is.
So
all right, sorry, AJ, go ahead.
To put in your adult sippy cups. Okay, we'll put it that way.
Buddy Lebron did call himself the GOAT. So the media didn't do that. There's actually video footage of him calling himself the GOAT. So whether the media's done it or not, he did it himself. So that's a little bit different than what happened to Baby Jordan, Harold Miner. So
very much so. Like what I know we're going to get into this conversation, but when you think about greatest of all time, when I look back at basketball and the basketball that I've seen, I definitely would include Tim Duncan as one of the greatest players of all time. Jordan, Bird, Magic. There's probably another player that I could throw in there possibly, but it doesn't really, it was more of like they were the greatest at kind of that position. But when you talk about greatest of all time, it's not just about rings, like how many rings, because if that was the case, there would really be one clear standing person as far as the greatest of all time, and that would be Bill Russell, because of how many rings he has. You know, he has 11 out of 12 times being there. You know, that would just end any conversation all the time. When you think about greatest of all time, though, in any sport, you've got to look at, one, how many times were they to the big dance, whatever sport it was. You got to look at what their contribution was to the game. MVP possibilities, Golden Gloves if you're talking baseball, Cy Youngs too. And then you also got to look at, did they change the game? Was there a game-changing thing that they did? Or did the game just remain the same, but they were an elevation of what the game is, like how great their talent was just made them special, but they didn't do anything to change the game. So, and I think that's where you really gotta, there's those factors that you gotta take into when you talk about who is really the greatest of all time. And that's why I think you have Kobe Bryant to throw in there. You have Steph Curry will probably be thrown in there at some point in time. Somebody help me out. There's probably another person that I'm missing right now that I can't think of.
I think you're pretty much the people that would have came out of my, like, I mean, you might go backwards and somebody might say Oscar Robertson, or somebody might say like Kareem. You can go backwards and find some people from like before we were born. But I think nowadays, like in our lifetime, I think we've pretty much hit on most of the people I think that would be in that category. Like those are the people I would have. Those are like all people you've said that would probably be in my top 10. Like all those guys we've talked about would be in the top 10, I think. So I think.
I mean, I'd love to throw Charles Barkley in there, but let's be honest, Charles Barkley was not one of the greatest players of all time. As much as I love Barkley, he was
top
not.
20.
But can I throw him in there just for shits and giggles?
Well, I mean, to me also, again, we're talking about going, if we wanted to go older, and obviously, again, these are not guys who I got to see play, unfortunately, but to me, there was always like, kind of like a three pillar thing upon which like the league was built on. You're talking Russell, Chamberlain, and Kareem. To me, it's like those are the guys who I think were, the most recognizable and like the most transformative guys, like, from those early NBA years. And Kareem, I think,
all centers.
Yes, I mean, it was a big man.
Thing.
Yeah, it was a big man's league for the most part. Even though you had guys like Oscar Robertson and Jerry West and some other guys, but
Pete
Maravich, obviously, yeah. I mean, like even before Russell, you had George Mikan. I mean, he was a center. So, but like Kareem, I think was maybe like the first guy who also for the league, except for maybe Chamberlain did. I'm not sure, but Kareem was the first guy to really have like some crossover appeal. He got into other avenues the way that, Jordan eventually would. And then obviously guys who've come after Jordan have. I mean, Kareem's role in Airplane is really one of the funniest, sports athlete performances of all time because, he's not playing himself. He's playing the co-pilot. But then when the kid recognizes him as Kareem and he keeps denying that he's Kareem, until the kid mentions like an insult from his father about, oh, you don't really try except in the playoffs. And he gets all pissed and he grabs the kid by his shirt and he's like, you tell your old man to try dragging Waltland and Lanier up and down the court for 40 minutes every game. And he's like, let's go, the kid. And the kid just got this look on his face like,
he was.
So that was just hilarious to me.
He was very reserved. Kareem was very reserved and quiet. So that would, like what you just said about him, that would be like us taking Tim Duncan and trying to put him in a movie and make him act, because Tim Duncan never did any. He just sat there. Like we never saw emotion from him once in a blue moon. That's why nobody under the age of 30 likes Tim Duncan, because he was boring and he didn't do anything flashy. He just played the game the way it was supposed to be played. Apparently that's not good enough anymore. You got to be able to dunk on people and run people over and travel and take 5 steps to be a good player nowadays.
The Phantom Club.
And trash talk like a son of a bitch.
Well,
pretend you got hit by somebody when you're all the way over here. Like, oh, that was a foul. Did you see he grazed my pinky? He grazed my pinky. Come on, man, that was a foul.
Saying that about Duncan is an interesting thing too, because I think, if you follow baseball right now, I think anybody who knows anything would unquestionably say the best player in baseball right now is Mike Trout, and he has been from pretty much almost the moment that he came into the league. But he hasn't been necessarily the most marketable guy in the world because he seems to not really care, in the sense that it's not something that like he's trying to pursue like himself. Like he doesn't crave that spotlight, that attention, like Kareem, like you said. And it got to the point where the baseball commissioner said, well, we've tried to do things with Mike to, like make him the face of the game, but Mike doesn't want to do it. Mike doesn't want to.
It's all Mike's fault.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, that's a good way to treat the guy who you want to make the face of your sport. It's like, he doesn't have that quiet but kind of like assuredness that, say, like Derek Jeter always had. But to diss him like that is kind of a funny thing. And I just can't really imagine why you would ever really go there with somebody again that you're trying to promote. So, but yeah, Duncan went to Wake Forest, so he didn't go to the flashiest school, not just in college basketball, but even his own conference, because Wake Forest is never going to be Duke or UNC. Then he goes to the Spurs, so it's a small market, relative to most teams in the NBA. I think everybody pretty much regards San Antonio as a small market. It's not New York or LA or even Chicago or Philly or Miami. So yeah, he just always seemed to kind of fly under the radar.
He also had.
The thing to me with Duncan too is that and this is the only knock that I'd ever really say Duncan, he never seemed to want to try when it came time for the Olympics. And I think that's because, like, the one time they did play in the Olympics, which I think was in 2004 when they only won the bronze, I think, he said something like FIBA sucks. So he pretty much said that the FIBA rules were just, too much of a pain in the ass to put up with, and that's why he didn't want to be bothered with.
Look who they put on his team with him too. So let's go.
That's another topic. I think everybody at that point would have said, "See ya." I would have been like, "Forget it."
Well, I just will always kind of value those guys who do go out for the Olympics. Like, I'm not the most nationalistic guy, but for whatever reason, when it comes time for the Olympics and everything, it's like, if we don't win the goddamn gold medal in basketball, then it's a freaking failure, So. I was the best. I was alive for 1972, but I was alive for 1988. My dad just told me about what a fiasco it was, and of course we got the dream team out of that. And
I think Duncan, maybe if you look deep enough, he probably did change the game in some way. He definitely changed the franchise, that's for sure. So I don't know if you could pinpoint one specific thing he did, but it's hard to not think that he had he did something to the game. You go to a place and he made the playoffs every year of his career. So he won 50-something games every season, and he won 5 championships. Like, he completely changed the franchise. Like, they could never win before he got there because David Robinson was soft. He was a pansy, so they could never win because Robinson. I like David Robinson, but that dude was soft as a marshmallow. So,
that's what happens when you go to the Navy and play basketball.
It's also ironic because the only reason Duncan ended up in San Antonio is because Robinson got hurt that year. So the Spurs were terrible, and that's the only reason why the Spurs were even in position to get Duncan.
Duncan never had he never put up 30 and 15 regularly. He was very consistent throughout his career. He was always good for 20 and 10 a night. He never he had games here or there, but I think somewhere in that he probably did something. Maybe somewhere a kid was like, you know what? I'm just going to learn how to play basketball the right way, and I'm not going to do any of the other stuff, and I'm going to become a good basketball player because I want to be like Tim Duncan. Maybe he motivated somebody somewhere to just be a fundamentally sound basketball player because heaven forbid that you would want to be that. So
well, and see, and I'm going to come in from the coaching perspective because Theo and I both coach youth basketball, or have. Who knows what's happen right now with COVID-19 if we're even going to have sports ever again for kids. But
I know.
Coming from looking at Tim Duncan, and you can look at any player from this aspect, specifically Tim Duncan, since we're talking about him. Yes, he wasn't flashy. Yes, he was not a media whore. and was not that got to be up in the media, got to be making present of myself. He was a basketball player. He knew what his role was. I'm going to go out. I'm going to play basketball. I'm going to do everything I can within my power to help my team win. If that means I have to put up X amount of points, get so many rebounds. So if you want to think about the way he might have changed the game, is the way that he played his position. Like as a power forward, a true power forward in the game where there is no power forward anymore. They give them all numbers, and a number just means that's your spot on the floor to start the motion of your offense. That's all that means anymore. He was the true power forward in a day and age when the game was slowly changing out of what it was when we grew up watching the game, where you had a true center, you had true power forward, small forward, shooting guard, point guard. He taught, if any kid was watching and wanted to learn the game of basketball, he was so fundamentally sound, was able to create in a time when there was no creation because people didn't know how to guard him really. If you look at it that way, people couldn't guard Tim Duncan the normal way on a normal one-on-one matchup. A lot of times they had to come down and double team him because he was so dominant in the post, the way he played the post. So if anything, you want to say the way he changed the game, he changed the way the post was played, how to play the post in a dominant fashion that you had to draw extra attention unless you had somebody that was that defensively sound. But there hasn't been a lot of Dennis Rodmans in the league that could control a player the way that he did. I honestly can't think anybody that played Duncan's position that was that dominant of a defender when he was playing.
Not a power forward, no.
No, like you said, Rodman, I think is the only come close. Maybe Barkley. I mean, Barkley was able to get rebounds. I don't know. I don't really know how great of like say like a one-on-one defender he was. He just
he was average.
Somewhere down the road, depending on depending on where the Warriors go, Draymond Green's name's going to come up in discussions down the road because he plays center a lot and he's a power, like he plays out of position all the time now, so he's guarding guys bigger than him. So his name's going to come up. He's been Defensive Player of the Year twice, and he's usually in the top 5. He's another guy that's a power forward his name's going to come up. I'm not saying but his name's going to come up in that discussion 10 years from now because he is really good at what he does. And because he's really playing a center, he's a power forward playing the 5 kind of because they play that small lineup now. He usually finds himself guard. Barkley's another guy who he was always guarding somebody bigger than him.
Right. He was a small forward but played power forward a lot.
And Draymond's a power forward that essentially plays center a lot of times because he has to guard the center on the other team because the Warriors played small ball, so now everybody wants to play small ball, like because they changed the game. So, I guess can we start talking about our
Well, one other quick thing I wanted to just ask you, AJ. How bummed were you when the Celtics did not win that lottery for Duncan?
I was pretty upset.
Yeah, because I mean, didn't they have like the best chance that year?
They did, but that's what there's a lottery for. So the NBA that year couldn't fix the lottery for him to go there, but they fixed it for LeBron to go to Cleveland for sure. They couldn't fix it that year for the Celtics, but I'll be damned if they didn't fix it for LeBron to end up in Cleveland.
Can you feel the hate, people? Can you feel the hate coming through?
I thought for sure he was going to say the Knicks and Ewing there, because that's always like the all-time conspiracy of the law.
The only time I've ever really bought into the conspiracy theory with the draft was LeBron, because I just think that was there. I just thought there was way too much coincidence there for me to believe that they weren't even supposed to. They weren't the number one team, so they won the lottery. So I have a hard time believing that wasn't fixed in some way. So
before we segue into our.
Yeah, I think AJ is itching at the bit to get to switch the conversation to something else here.
Before we do
that, Jeremy, do you have something you want to say?
Absolutely.
He always
Don't
does.
forget, everybody, coming up at the end of our show, which is, I'm not sure when that's going to be. Depends on how long we feel like talking. We have the Mount Rushmore. based on, well, you can probably guess it's going to be based on today's topic. But you got to tune into the end to find out who the 4 people are that are going to join Mount Rushmore this day.
Do you want to start, Theo, or do you want me to start?
Well, let me say this. So we're going to
what part do you want me to start with here?
We're going to talk.
Might go on for 2 hours.
Well, no. We're going to talk about a topic here, which, as you might be able to tell, is very near and dear to AJ's heart. It's also very near and dear to Theo's heart, being that they're, Theo's, was a huge Bulls fan, and therefore was Jordan. I've always felt like I was always a Jordan guy too, even though he didn't play for my team. That's because he went to Carolina. But anyway, if anybody watching has seen the movie Bad Teacher with Cameron Diaz and Jason Segel, one of the most memorable parts of that film is where Jason Segel, who is a teacher, is getting into an argument with one of his pupils, who's got to be no more than 12 years old and probably younger than that, about who the better player is between Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Now, let me just preface this by saying, if you ever go to basketballreference.com, and, it's a great place to look up stats for anything, you get them so quickly. There's 2 stats, actually, which would be considered like advanced metrics. One, of course, is called the player efficiency rate. All time, Michael Jordan is number 1, and LeBron James is number 2. There's another stat which is similar, which is called a VORP, which means value over replacement player. In that stat, LeBron James is number 1, and Michael Jordan is number 2. Now, one of the reasons for that,
is
that because
rebounds.
LeBron has played more games in his career. He's in the middle of now, this season that just got suspended was his 17th season, whereas Jordan only played 15 seasons, and not all of them were full seasons because he had the comeback year where he missed a lot of time. So if you look at it in a per game basis, Jordan does come out on top, and I expect LeBron's probably right behind him. But it's just very interesting that they're so close in both of those stats, which, again, those are the kind of stats which, more or less called sabermetrics. And they're meant to, of course, compare players across eras and across time differences, especially if they have each other, which Jordan and LeBron never did. So it's just very interesting that, again, they come out to be the top 2 players. Now, I will fully admit, I personally do not have a horse in this race. I always like Jordan. I've always liked LeBron. But 2 of my colleagues here very strong feelings about it because of because of one person's just, fact that, again, Jordan was his guy, and the other person because he's just always hated LeBron because he went to the Cavaliers. So, guys,
before these 2 gentlemen take over, AJ and Theo take over.
What?
Before you take over, give me 1 second. I just want to tell our fans that please understand, this is not a LeBron bashing session, okay? But understand that this is very heavily opinionated based on the way they feel, okay? We're not taking anything away from LeBron as a player, but we have very clear arguments for who we believe is the number 1 player of all time in basketball. Now you guys can take it away.
Now Jeremy has said that, let the LeBron bashing begin.
You never finished your Jason Segel thing from Bad Teacher.
Well, I don't remember the lines exactly, and basically I was kind of hoping that maybe you guys would want to act it out.
Okay. I'm going to let Theo go first because...
Listen. So I ain't going to take anything away from what he does now. I'm not going to take anything away that he does in his personal life. He does stuff for charities. He's a good person in regards to that. The school
I agree with Joe on that. Theo on that.
The stuff he did for the school that he opened for the inner city kids. He does really good stuff outside of basketball, and I commend him for that. That's awesome because he is a good person. Absolutely. But let's get back to the true shit with basketball. Now, I mean, we blame this on the media because the media is the ones who put this shit, and I have to listen to this shit every goddamn year, after year, after year, and it's fucking annoying. So to be honest with you, if you people really watch The Last Dance and don't understand why his peers, people who were young rookies in the league at that time, and even some other players that are young call him the GOAT, I don't know what to tell you anymore. That whole the war and all that stuff, like a lot of that stuff proves that's one aspect of it. I can care less if Jordan's been out rebounded or out assisted by LeBron. You know, you're talking about two different positions. Magic Johnson out rebounded and out assist. You know, Michael, who's better in that category? I mean, it's obvious. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. You can take stats, you can take season accolades, postseason accolades, but at the end of the day, um, the will of somebody to want to win as much as he did every single day during practice, during games, all the time, even like just like we saw poker games or playing golf or whatever. Um, he just wanted to win. And you know what? Another thing too is that people wanted to criticize him for being a bad person. So be it. He wanted to win, and he did everything he needed to do to win. And the other thing too is like I understand people say, the way he went about it, being a teammate, won't resonate in today's NBA. No shit, because everyone bitches and complains about everything, and they're more. No disrespect to them, they're the ones who get millions of dollars, not me. But they're pansies in a sort of a way. They bitch about everything. It's ridiculous sometimes watching the NBA. Hence why sometimes I have to turn the NBA game off and see if there's a college basketball game on or a high school basketball game. Hell, I even watch the WNBA because sometimes those games are fucking better than the NBA games. So you get tired. You get tired of that shit. But
absolutely,
back then, his teammates might have hated him, called him an asshole, called him a dick. But at the end of the day, they went to the playoffs and they won NBA titles. And like Steve Kerr said, he owes a lot to Jordan, and a lot of those other people do too. He got Luke Longley a fucking crazy ass contract to go. What was it, fucking Phoenix? Even though that didn't last. I mean, Pippen finally got his contract. There were just players who went other places that got bigger contracts. But like, shit, you did this playing with him. What can you do for us? There's a lot of intangibles, and there's a lot of stats. I can fucking name off stats all goddamn night if I really wanted to. I mean, there was this stat here, and this is like during the All-Star break. I think this was the 86 or 87 or 88 season. I apologize. I don't have that stat. But halfway through the season, Jordan had more block shots than 10 centers combined in the NBA. Now, how does that happen? You have a shooting guard in a big man's league has way more blocks than fucking centers do. That's just crazy in itself.
And that becomes the fundamental part of this argument. And whenever I argue, and because I live where I live, I'm surrounded by LeBron dick suckers, and I hear about it all the time. For years, I've been hearing about how great he is, and blah, 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 and they're all 20-year-old kids, and they don't know what they're talking about. As soon as I start talking about defense, they shut up. Like, they'll talk about
that's the biggest thing right there.
Oh, my God. He had this one block that helped them win a game. It helped them win the game. It didn't win the game. So, like, that block is overrated. It's very overrated. LeBron's had a couple of chase down blocks. Nobody talks about when in 2018 in the NBA Finals, when Durant was going to shoot that three, he didn't want to guard it. He passed the buck to somebody else because the year before, Durant busted that shot in his face. So instead of saying, I'm the best defensive player on this team, I want this, he passed the buck to somebody else so he didn't get embarrassed. That's not a GOAT. GOATs don't do that. GOATs, because me and Theo have had this conversation. We're alphas on the basketball court. If I'm not letting that guy make that shot, so I'm guarding that guy to make sure he doesn't make that shot. I'm not passing the buck to somebody else. Theo is like 6 or 7 inches taller than me. If I was playing against Joe in a 3-on-3 game, I would guard him at the end to not let him get that shot because I know he wants it.
And folks, I've been on the receiving end of the don't let him get that shot off. Foul.
So he passed the buck a lot, and earlier in his career, I think LeBron was a pretty good defensive player. Not great, but pretty good. But I watched the NBA Finals against the Warriors. There was lots of times where he took plays off, just watched people go by, didn't care. He gave up. So when Jordan won Defensive Player of the Year twice, and he made like all first team defense like 7 or 8 times. I think LeBron, he won Defensive Player of the Year once, but he only made all defense first team a couple of times. To me, that's where the gap really is. You can throw the points and assists and rebounds up. They're close offensively. I think the gap is really, besides the rings, I think the gap is in the defense. I think LeBron is a decent defensive player. Jordan is the best defensive guard of all time. Arguably one of the best defensive players, period, of all time. You're talking about the all-time great versus somebody who is decent, top 20, maybe. That's a gap. That's a huge gap to me. Not to, like I said, not to mention the rings. And Theo, a couple weeks ago, told me that Jordan's record in the NBA Finals is 24-11. LeBron's is 18-31. So some guy who's got a losing record on the biggest stage is the GOAT? I don't think so. No way. No way. When Theo told me that one blew me away more than anything. Like, I'm just like, no way. Some guy that's got a losing record in the finals is the GOAT.
Yeah. There's certain stats you got to throw out to the side. Like the 3-point shooting is a horse shit. I get tired of hearing that stuff because LeBron's not a great 3-point shooter. Jordan could have been better than what he was, but he wasn't. He was a 34% guy, just like LeBron is right now. So that's a wash with there. You know, I'll take.
Well, he did make those 6 threes against the Trailblazers.
Yeah, but I mean,
which was pretty freaking awesome.
And you know, like I'll take. You know, you want to talk about rebound and assist, but I'd rather have somebody who's. It's funny is Jordan's a 6'6" guard and LeBron's a 6'8", 6'9" power forward, and yet Jordan has averaged more blocks per game in his career than LeBron has. So I'll take that. And the steals is 2.5 to 1.7. I'll take that. I'll take the whole defense. It's a two-way player, and LeBron's never been a true two-way player on both sides of the floor ever. You know,
Pat.
I mean, Jordan's one that has, 10 scoring titles. We already know about that. Let's pass off on that. But I mean, he's led the league 3 times in steals. LeBron 0. I mean, I can throw all kinds of stats out at you if you want to, because people love fucking stats. But it's more than stats. It's just, you know, here, like Jordan's been all defensive first team 9 times. LeBron, I think, is 6, 5 or 6. But it's just
5 times first team and 1 time second team for LeBron.
Yeah. So I mean, it's
nuts.
You just can't.
I mean, we gotta agree on this, that the NBA game has changed. Defense is not as relevant as it is. It should be.
No,
it really should be, because defense has got to be part of the game. But
no
it's turned into a high scoring game. That's what it is right now.
And no one wants to play fucking defense. They play defense like fucking 2% of the goddamn time, or when they feel it's necessary, the last 2 minutes of the game. Otherwise, everything is fucking jack up a 3, haul your ass and trail down to the fucking, you know, hoop and slam dunk, shoot a 3, shoot a 3, do fancy shit.
Just because the game has changed, that doesn't mean you have to follow suit. Like if LeBron really wanted to play like he still could, but he's like succumbed to what everybody else does. Like I don't think Jordan would have done. That's another thing with Jordan. I don't think he would have let somebody tell him how the game, like he wouldn't have let that happen to him. He would have keep playing the game the way he wants to. He wouldn't like give in to, oh, wow, the game is changing. I don't think that Jordan would have done that so much. I think he would have still played his game, whereas I think LeBron has kind of gave in and said, okay, nobody plays defense, so I guess I'm not going to play defense anymore. That's like a cop-out to me. That's like not really a legit reason. So
there could be something to that, because LeBron's, again, like I said, 5 times all defensive first team and 1 time second team. The last time he was all defensive first team was in 2013, and the 1 time he made all defensive second team was 2014. Jordan was still making all defensive first team his last 3 seasons, 96, 97, 98. Just some other things as far as about stats. they actually had the same blocks per game rate for their whole career, which was 0.8. Steals, yeah, Jordan comes out ahead of LeBron. That's definitely one thing where he comes out ahead. Obviously, the scoring. You also mentioned the 3-point shooting. Jordan was 32.7% for his career. LeBron's 34.4%. That's really a negligible difference right down to. Yeah, one thing I did notice, which I thought was interesting. You look at their regular season like per game averages, and then you look at their playoff per game averages. Both guys scored, rebounded, and assisted at a higher rate in the playoffs than in the regular season. So I think that's a point for both guys, because it's basically showing then that they are playing better, at least as individuals, in in the biggest games and on the highest stage and everything. Now, here's something else I just want to kind of throw out there and kind of get your opinions. I've heard the argument, and I think even my dad seems to feel this way. LeBron has the ability, better than Jordan did, to make those around him better. Now,
that's iffy.
My thing with that is that, like I said, I always wanted LeBron to be on the Olympic team because I always kind of felt like there was something to that. But Matt, you pointed out, or AJ, I'm sorry, you pointed out the finals record. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, but I mean, Jordan's got so much of a better record in the finals. So how much better is LeBron truly making all of his teammates to have such a lackluster record in the finals?
Well, so let me weigh in on this real quick, because I have a very interesting somewhat stat here that I found I was reading an article today about LeBron James, and because I was like, I want to see some stuff. Maybe there's something I don't know about LeBron James. And AJ, you've pointed this out a couple times about the players that LeBron's had. But this also go back to what Darth Pat was talking about with, is LeBron really making people around him better? Is he better at that than Jordan was? And I have to say nay to that, because I think that's a bunch of bullshit. Just because what I've seen on The Last Dance and what I've seen of LeBron's career at this point in time. But here's the stat. So they did this with people who have been in the NBA Finals at least 5 times in their career. And their their plus minus percentage that they were going to possibly win. LeBron is at almost the very, very bottom with a minus 0.3. The only person below him is Wilt Chamberlain with a minus 1.6. So they're saying, based on teammates, who they played, times in the NBA Finals, that he had a negative 0.3% chance of winning the NBA Finals when he made it there, which I think is very interesting, because Jordan's was plus 2 and Bill Russell's was plus 2.4. But that also, I think, goes to show you the kind of player that Jordan was and his teammates, because you get to see a behind the scenes thing with The Last Dance, and how much he pushed his other teammates to practice harder, to get better, because he was trying to get better every single day that he stepped on that court, every day that he practiced, everything. I think the other thing that kind of hurts LeBron is the rivalry portion of the NBA. There's no big rivalries to say, I have to beat this team. This team cannot be better than we are. We've got to beat this team. We got to smash them into the ground. And when we get to the finals, we got to destroy the Golden State Warriors. That's where, the Celtics and Lakers, they had that rivalry. They're like, we got to get to the finals. We got to get to the finals. And then we got to kill each other in the finals. We got to be the best.
The problem is, too, that takes a negative on him, too, is the whole, I'm taking my talents to South Beach. Once he did that, that pretty much ruined it. Those times he was with Miami, and I don't care. I'm not saying he had super teams in Cleveland, but, Kyrie and Kevin Love were, top tier NBA players and whatnot. So when you associate yourselves with higher tier players and you're forming teams like that, and you're finding those reserve players that just want to play to try to win a championship, like they did with Ray Allen and what's the other guy's name?
Chris Bosh.
I forget. No. He was a role player. I just can't remember all their names. You're going to get guys who are going to take less money to play to play on teams like that to win. But unfortunately, they didn't do everything they set out to do when they went to South Beach, because they should have.
That should have been a dynasty.
Yeah, they should have, but they didn't, and that some of that fault it does go on LeBron. You want to be a facilitator, that's fine. Magic was a damn facilitator, but you know what Magic did? Magic at crunch time, when it was time to fucking score, he was like, "Give me the fucking ball, get the fuck out of my way," and that's not what LeBron does. He doesn't do that at all. He sees a double or triple team and it's time of crunch time, he's gonna pass it. Great. Make sure you're passing it to someone who's gonna fucking make a shot, or you or someone on your team that's gonna do something, not just pass it off to anybody. And that's what his problem. He doesn't know. 2 minutes before that, he'll haul ass and truck down to the fucking basket, and run somebody over and get a foul. But yet in the crunch time, he very rarely does that. Like, why? What's preventing you? He has to be afraid of some type of fucking failure.
Killer mentality, man.
Yeah. And he doesn't have that, and that's what separates you from. That's why I think, if you want to talk about LeBron, let's talk about LeBron and Kobe, because yeah, Kobe's the same thing. He didn't have a lot of rebounds and assists, but at the same time, he had that killer mentality, and he would fucking shoot that shit all goddamn night long to fucking beat you.
Because of the younger set too, and we've had this discussion already before. The misnomer is that LeBron played against better teams than Jordan did. That's bullshit. So, I'm tired of hearing about the Warriors were really good and the Spurs were really good. But like you said, Joe, LeBron played against 30% of the teams LeBron played against in the postseason had 50 or more wins, whereas 70% for Jordan. That's a huge gap. We're not talking about 5% here. We're talking about 30%. That's a huge gap. And people that didn't watch the NBA, these 25-year-old kids, the NBA was better back then than it is now. It was harder. I don't even think at this point that it's an opinion. I think it's a fact. So I think the NBA was better back then. I watched it. I've watched it since I was about 8. And I think the NBA was better back then because I think there were more all-time great players playing in between 87 and 98. We'll pick a 10-year period there. More of the all-time great NBA players were playing during that 10 years than there are now. I don't believe there's that many all-time great. There are good players, but how many people in the NBA right now legitimately are first-time ballot Hall of Famers? LeBron, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. That's it. James Harden has to win something before I think he can't keep choking the postseason before you bring his name up. So to me, I named 3 guys right now who are surefire bets for Hall of Fame. There's probably a couple others who are maybes. Those are the only 3 guys who I think are for sure right now.
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of great players, but they don't win when it comes to the postseason. They fizzle out. They're great regular season players. They're dominant regular season players, but postseason they can't step up and they can't win.
That's James Harden right now. James Harden can do whatever he wants in the regular season until he wins a game that matters. That's always going to follow him. Chris Paul's another guy. Great regular season player. Garbage in the playoffs. I'm not impressed. Win something, buddy, and then we'll talk. Barkley made it to the finals. Ewing made it to the finals. Those guys that didn't get rings at least made it to the finals. These guys haven't even made it to the finals yet. So, to me, Harden probably will get in first, second ballot. I won't necessarily agree with that, though, because I think he hasn't delivered when it matters. And that what you do in the postseason matters in the NBA. You can try to play it off like it doesn't, but it matters. Winning matters. Mm-hmm. So that's the gap. Jordan won way more than LeBron did. That's the easiest statistic to throw out in this argument is 6 rings to 3. That really the argument's over already.
LeBron got swept. Jordan never got swept in the finals. Mm-hmm. Let's put another thing. Another thing too was people always talk about LeBron going to the finals how many years in a row. Well, he's been to the finals 9 times in.
It was 8 years in a row.
Yeah, 8 years in a row. So he's how many times in the finals? And nine final trips.
9 times.
He's
3 for 17 years, but yet Magic made it to the finals 9 times in 12 years. So that's an irrelevant stat there.
Right, and Magic has a winning record in the finals too.
He does.
Correct. Here's something I want to just read. This I found this from a guy, a sports guy, a show on one of the Barstool podcast things that I watch and all that stuff. One of the guys posted this on there. He said from the time he was beating Georgetown in 1982 to the time he beat Utah in 1998, Jordan was the best player at the end of the season, at the end of the series, and at the end of the games. Jordan just didn't dominate pro basketball in the 90s. He tore down the conversations that guided leagues for decades, shifting the focus from bruising bigs to shot-creating wings. Don't ask if MJ could hang with the elite guards and wings of today. He was the progenitor of them. He reshaped basketball wisdom thanks to an unprecedented blend of physical gifts, competitive spirit, and artistry. In a copycat league, but Michael Jordan didn't plagiarize. He wrote the book. And I mean, I think a lot of that is definitely
Kobe
valid.
Kobe gave he said that he wouldn't have won anything if it wasn't for Jordan. So like one of the other greatest players of all time gave all the credit to Jordan. Like he didn't even say I did this myself. He said, apparently those guys, he was training with him and nobody really knew about it. It's not like Durant and LeBron hanging out and posting pictures together. Kobe and Jordan's was more clandestine and we didn't know as much about it. But for that guy to give all of his credit to Jordan, that's another all-time great player saying none of this happens if Jordan doesn't teach me stuff.
Yeah. So, all right, guys. So we are minutes away from the Mount Rushmore based on today's theme, the GOAT, coming up, like I said, in mere minutes. So stay tuned. You do not want to miss it. And on top of that, don't forget to go to our YouTube page, which you can find us on YouTube at Four Guys Roundtable Show. You can leave a comment on the video. You can also find us on iTunes. You can find us on Spotify, and you can find us on Stitcher. All those things where you can find our podcast for the audio version, not just the video version on YouTube. So make sure you go check us out there. It's really good stuff. All right, Pat. Pat.
Yeah, to bring it back to kind of where we started this discussion again, the movie Bad Teacher.
Let's go back to this.
He's found it.
The argument was literally what we've kind of discussed. The kid is insisting that LeBron is a better rebounder and passer. And the teacher just says, LeBron will never beat Jordan. Call me when LeBron has 6 championships. To which the kid retorts, that's your only argument? And the teacher just shouts right back, it's the only argument I need.
And it's true.
I believe
true.
Theo said that a few minutes ago.
When the argument progresses past that, I think me and Theo have proved tonight, and even you guys to some, there are multiple other ways to go in that. The one thing, too, about the people I do know who try to argue with me that LeBron's better, they can't really give me anything. Nobody's ever, sat across from me or on the phone with me and just gave me something where I'm like, okay, maybe you're right on that. Maybe I didn't think about that. Nobody's really ever came at me with anything convincing. Like, if you're going to make your case to me, you better come at, me or Joe with something convincing. If you don't even come with, something convincing, that's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. And that's what happens with most of these people I argue with about it. They don't have enough. They don't know enough, or they're just throwing crap at me. And I'm just like, bring me something. Don't just say, well, it's not just about the rings. There's other things. There are other things. We talked about them. Jordan is the only person in NBA history to win the MVP and the defensive player in the same year. That means he was the best player in the NBA, period, that year on both sides of the ball. Nobody else has ever done that. So
that's crazy.
So
Pat,
I think that this is an argument that will probably last as long as we're talking about sports in some way, shape, or form. Again, like I said, I mentioned the 2 sabermetric stats, which have them both 1 and 2. I don't know of anybody else that's really active right now. I know Anthony Davis is high on the efficiency rating stat, but I don't know anybody else that's really that high up on the value stat that could cut up to their levels and everything. But I think that ultimately what we've said is that this is going to kind of be one of those arguments like people used to have about who was better, Ted Williams or Joe DiMaggio, or more recently, who was better, Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. And I think in a lot of cases, the tiebreaker that people are always going to use to try to be like the argument settlement is going to be the number of championships.
It is.
Joe DiMaggio supposedly took pleasure in mocking the fact that Ted Williams never won the World Series and DiMaggio won, I can't remember, 6 or 7 or whatever now. Brady obviously has the edge in Super Bowls over Peyton Manning. Will LeBron be able to catch Jordan? The clock's ticking for him. He's 35 now, I think. I mean, I don't see any reason why he couldn't play another 6 or 7 years.
But in today's league, yeah.
He's going to start slowing down. If you look at some of his numbers, like I said, like that value stat, he's not as high up on that as he was a few years ago. So time catches up with all of us, especially when you're an athlete. So, So again, it's a fascinating argument. And like I said, have we settled it? Hell no.
So does that mean it's time?
That's all right.
Me and Theo's mind, it's been settled. So.
Well, okay, but again, I'm saying like the greater populace out there, and again, that's why we love sports, is because we just love having these debates. So with that, I think the time has come.
Yes.
For the Mount Rushmore.
It's time.
Keeping with the theme tonight, again, which has been the NBA, we are going to pick our Mount Rushmore of NBA. So with that, let's see. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Jeremy, why don't you start?
I better not be Mo.
Okay. So because I love this theme and I love the fact that we're doing this every single podcast, our theme is, as Darth Pat mentioned, is NBA, and we're going with greatest of all time just players. Not the greatest of all time player, but players that we have seen play in our lifetime. We're not going back to the 60s and 70s that we've never actually watched. We're staying within our theme. So I'm going to get the first pick, I guess, since it came to me. And I am going to go, even though I have never been a Lakers fan by any means, but I can appreciate 100% the kind of player that he was and what he did, and that is Magic Johnson is my pick to go on the Mount Rushmore today. And it's simply because from what I was mentioning earlier about all-encompassing what makes you a GOAT in any sport, Magic changed the game. Him and Bird came in at the same time, but he changed the game as far as what a guard can do and what a guard can be. When he goes to the finals and Kareem's down with an injury and he goes, I'll play center. He's 6'9". He's not supposed to play center. Like, he's supposed to be 6'11", 7'2", somewhere in there to play center. But he goes out and plays center, and if that doesn't happen, as a rookie at 20 years old, they don't win the NBA Finals that year. They don't go on and beat the Celtics. Sorry, AJ.
Wow. He had monster numbers. Like, he didn't just show up. He played well. Like, he had 30 points in a couple games. Like, he played out of position well.
Yeah. So you can't, you had that. You had the no-look passes that he did. He could shoot. He could dribble. Like, he was just one of those players that could just play. Like, he could play his ass off. And he proved that year in, year out until, the whole HIV thing happened. And then he tried to make a comeback, a couple times. And then, of course, Jordan came in the league, and then it was kind of all over for pretty much everybody. Once they got established, the Bulls got established. But so for me, Magic Johnson goes on Mount Rushmore today. I'm going to pass it to AJ.
So I'm going to pick my pick for Mount Rushmore is Larry Bird. Magic and Larry Bird were the choices. So Bird was my favorite player as a kid, and like Jeremy said, those two guys as a unit both changed the game. Magic was more flashy. He made the passes. He did all the flashy stuff, and he had that $1 million smile that the media loved. Bird was more of I don't really like the media, but he had to learn how to deal with them, because when you're that good of a player, and he made it work, but he was kind of more like laid back about it. Because I said I think he had the smartest, like the best basketball IQ I've ever seen. He said in his books I've read about him, he said he got bored in games, so he would start saying, okay, in the third quarter, I'm only going to shoot with my left hand. Like, he got so bored playing sometimes that he was doing stuff like that to challenge himself. Like, that to me is somebody that's way ahead of their time. When you're challenging yourself to do stuff like that. Or he was like, I think one time with Kevin McHale, they were arguing. I think they were neck and neck for like the free throw percentage for the season. They were bickering, and I think they said McHale was like talking shit to him from the sidelines. And I think they said Bird shut his eyes and made the free throw with his eyes shut just to piss McHale off. So, like, there's a game where Bird's playing against the Hawks where he drops like 60, and by the time he gets to 50, they're showing the highlights, and the guys on the Hawks bench are going nuts. So guys on the opposing team's bench are like slapping high fives with each other as Bird is lighting them up. Like,
that's how bad you suck. You're cheering for the other team.
I'm sure it happened with Jordan, but because I liked Bird, that was the first time I had ever seen something like that, and it was crazy. Like, he makes a three on right by their bench and gets fouled, makes the shot, gets fouled, and the guys are like slapping him on the back from the Hawks.
Great play, Bird. It was against us, but that was fucking awesome.
Almost kind of sounds like when you're getting no hit or perfect games in baseball. Like, you know, as a fan, at least, you're almost rooting to see it happen because it's so rare.
Thank gosh, we got to see Bird and Magic and Jordan like change the game, because I don't know if I would have liked basketball as much if I didn't get to see those guys. Those guys made me like basketball, especially Bird and Magic, because of my age. It was really those two guys that made me like basketball. So I'm going to turn it over to Theo now. We know who he's picking already, don't we?
Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen. Yes.
He wouldn't be a bad pick. He wouldn't be a bad pick.
Like, no, I was gonna say Dennis Rodman to be an ass, but I like Dennis. No, it's Michael Jordan, GOAT, the one and only. Just watch it, Last Dance, people. Just watch it again on repeat over and over again. Like I watched, Game 6 of the NBA Finals over and over again. It's all good. That's what it is. Sorry. Just another thing too. Let's look at the last game when he makes that last shot. Let's look at the whole aspect of that game. He pretty much carried that team to that win. I mean, you come into a game with Scottie Pippen having a shitty back. He's in and out of the game. He comes in, can barely play. He's kind of a decoy, and that's kind of stupid on Utah's part to even let that even happen. And then Dennis Rodman's not playing well at all. Like, fucking Karl Malone's kicking his ass to goddamn pretty much the whole game. No one else is really fucking scoring points. Kukoc, I think, was the second leading scorer with like 15 or 17 points for the game. And Jordan pretty much had to put the whole fucking team on his back and carry that team to an NBA title. And you want to talk about a block that happened 3 minutes before the end of the game? Fuck that block. Let's look at the fucking last minute where he scores. He scores the basket. They come down. He steals it from Karl Malone. He does it himself, steals the fucking ball because he's smart, and then goes down and makes the winning fucking drive. So he scores 2 baskets and a steal. And then within 30, 40 fucking seconds to goddamn seal the fucking win.
The greatest individual performance on the biggest stage of any person ever in NBA history. That's the greatest 40 seconds.
With the iconic.
Any individual
picture
had in the game of that
magnitude. My picture's right there.
Nobody's even close
right there
to having a moment like he did. Like Joe said, he did everything in that 40 seconds. Nobody else did anything except for him.
In the whole game. And he was exhausted and tired, and he still beat a fucking Utah Jazz team pretty much by himself.
Which was a really good Utah Jazz team too.
Yeah. They had a really good team.
Really good.
Absolutely. All right, Pat. Don't disappoint me.
Darth Pat.
Well, I think it's, pretty much impossible to not, because, we've already had Jordan.
Yeah, you're going to the dark side, aren't you? You fucker.
Well, I can't say any of the guys who, of course, came before I was, really alive or watching. So I can't say Russell or Chamberlain or Kareem or Oscar Robertson. I also couldn't ever feel right picking guys like Dr. J or Moses Malone, whose I feel like careers were over before I ever started watching.
True.
At the same time, I don't feel like I can pick any of the guys who are the big superstars of today because I just don't watch the NBA that much anymore. So I want to pick LeBron or James Harden or Chris Paul or Kevin Durant.
Get on with it.
Is the guy who, in addition to Jordan, I really feel is the most transformative player that I've seen. And that's something we didn't mention before, and that's Shaquille O'Neal. I know that can be
interesting.
And, again, it's not as if being a dominant center was anything new in the NBA when Shaq came along. But I just feel like there was something about Shaq that kind of transcended a few things. Maybe it was his personality, the fact that, again, they looked at him and said, oh, we got to get this guy into things outside of basketball, whether it's making a bad rap album or making a bunch of bad movies. Though Blue Chips was good.
I have to admit something right now. I had his 2 albums, Shaq Fu and I don't know what the other one was.
Shaq Diesel.
Shaq Diesel.
I remember thinking about buying that too when I was like 13 years old or whatever the hell it was, and then I thought better of it. But and like I said,
that song was with Fu Schnickens. Can We Rock? What's up, Doc?
That's the whole reason I bought it.
And like I said, I mean, they put him in movies. I mean, he was good in Blue Chips, but he was basically playing himself. And then I never saw the other ones. They had him in wrestling events. He's there with Hulk Hogan at the 1994 Bash at the Beach. But again, they came up, of course, with the concept of Hack-a-Shaq because obviously he was such a horrendous free throw shooter.
Yeah.
That also kind of told you that they felt like, well, this is the only way we can stop the guy is by putting him on the foul line. So I just always felt like there was not many other players that you saw that other teams were so openly specific about saying, we have to stop this player. We can't let this player beat him. I mean, obviously, you'd say that about Michael Jordan, but at the same time, you couldn't stop Michael Jordan if you wanted to. So unless you had like Gerald Wilkins playing defense on him or something like that, because I remember them calling Gerald Wilkins a Jordan buster. But I don't know. To me, Shaq just checked a lot of boxes again as far as being a dominant player, a guy who was just hard to move, and a guy who obviously had a huge impact. Whether it was on or off. So to me. Once he got into his prime, I think he was probably the most dominant force in the league, especially once Jordan was out. So
I'll give it to you. I'll agree with you on that, Dart Pat.
I'm gonna 100% disagree with you. So,
what a surprise!
We're just gonna go right back to what we went to with the other argument. You sound like a casual fan because you're talking about what the guy did offensively. You didn't say nobody says anything ever about what Shaq did defensively because he didn't do anything defensively. So here's the problem. You have Shaq, who's a really good center, numbers wise. You compare his numbers to Olajuwon, very similar offensively. Defensively, Olajuwon's the greatest center of all time defensively. He was 2 times defensive player of the year and 9 times first team all defense. That's a huge gap. So you're like taking this guy just because he's good offensively, and then you're also trying to justify the fact that he sucked at the free throw line. You're like trying to use that to his advantage. And he missed the end of lots of important games because he couldn't make free throws. So your best player had to go sit on the bench because he couldn't make free throws at the end of the game. Isn't that when you want your best player in the game? I don't think that's when you want him on the bench. He also got swept in the playoffs 6 times. That's a lot. So I think Shaq was a really good offensive player, but I think, once again, everybody forgets about the defensive end. So, and I think that you take Olajuwon over Shaq because he was a better defensive player. He was a better two-way player. I'm not saying Shaq wasn't good because Shaq was good. His numbers in the 3 finals that they won that with the Lakers are ridiculous. But I think, once again, the defense thing comes into play. And I don't like when people forget about the defensive side of the ball, because defense mattered back then. If you were using that analogy now, maybe you're right, but I still think back then you have to take into account they had similar careers, both of them. They both played the same amount of years. Shaq won more rings, but numbers-wise, they were very similar until you switch to the defensive side of the ball. Then everything changes. So I think that's where the problem comes in. I would rather have a guy who's better on both sides of the ball in that instance. But Olajuwon, I think he...
And AJ, I agree with you. But that's the great thing about the Mount Rushmore.
Casual fan here,
it can be
here.
Whoever you feel like putting up there. Your nomination is your nomination, which is great, and we can have a debate. So I agree with you.
Casual Darth Pat over here.
The Darth Pat casual basketball fan.
To the dark
he admitted
side.
that in the beginning, so we knew his pick for Mount Rushmore was going to be off the wall. So it's all good.
I could have said LeBron, but I didn't.
Thank God.
We would have probably kicked you off the podcast.
See, at least you saved us that horribleness. All right, so our Mount Rushmore for this week's episode is Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, and Shaquille O'Neal. That's a pretty good set of basketball players, I would say.
I'll take it.
Are we ready to go home?
Yes.
All right, Theo.
Yeah.
Are you taking us home, or is Darth Pat taking us home?
I'm going to open my... Pat could do it this week.
I'm already home, and I don't want you guys to come over.
All right, Darth Pat, take us home.
All right. Well, I think we've had a pretty lively debate, and I think when we were first starting this, we weren't sure how long we'd get out of this, but I think we got a pretty good long while.
We sure did.
So I think we did just fine with that. So, hey, next time we'll be talking about TBD.
Very
Adam Cole, baby.
And no, that's not some kind of weird thing for some of you perverts out there.
Well, they might think otherwise with the poster hanging up above your head there. Sorry.
Yeah. But anyway, no, we haven't discussed what we're going to talk about next time. I mean, there's a bunch of different things we could come up with. I mean, one thing that I'd kind of like to talk about, but I don't know if everybody else wants, is what's going on with, are we going to have a friggin' baseball season this year? But we'll see what happens there between now and then, too. So, but, hey, whatever we talk about next time, I'm pretty sure it'll be a lively discussion as it's been the first two times. And I have a feeling that we'll probably have another Mount Rushmore to talk about as well.
You betcha!
All right, so for Theo, for Jeremy, for AJ Nitro, I am Darth Pat saying, till next time, Rebel Scum.